Welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, here's your host, Matthew Ablin.
Hello and welcome to episode 63 of the Queen City Music Podcast. This episode of the Queen City Music Podcast is sponsored by Middle Sea Jazz, Charlotte's premier jazz club located at 300 South Brevard Street in Uptown Charlotte. Stop in for Thursday night jazz jams, gospel Sundays every third Sunday of the month, or bi-weekly Wednesdays for Remember Wednesdays. But if you prefer, stay in for the evening and watch their Saturday night live stream, where you'll have access to the best performances Middle Sea Jazz has to offer. And if you want the VIP treatment, get a Baby Grand membership, where life takes you to a higher note. Tickets are now available for December 2nd and 3rd with Joey Alexander, December 9th with Connie Hahn, December 21st and 22nd, Jazz and Soul Music and Middle Sea Jazz present A Charlie Brown Christmas featuring the Sean Mason Trio and Tyra Scott. And on December 31st, High Voltage, a New Year's Eve celebration with the Voltage Brothers. And if you're in need of a new instrument or accessories, head over to Midwood Guitar Studio, Charlotte, North Carolina's own boutique guitar shop located in Plaza Midwood. Midwood Guitar Studio not only has the finest selection of boutique guitars, but familiar names like Fender, Martin, Taylor, Two Rock, and many others. Whether it's a guitar, bass, amp, effects pedal, or a much-needed accessory, the knowledgeable and friendly staff at Midwood Guitar Studio will help guide you in the right direction for your next purchase. Welcome to episode 63 of the QCMP. My voice is a little bit different than usual. I've been sick the last few weeks, so please bear with me. For this final episode of 2022, we'll be doing a year in review, which is something a bit different for the QCMP. I'll be reaching back to episodes 52 through 56, featuring Daniel Grimmett from Dark Label Music, bassist Ron Brendle, classical guitarist Marina Alexandra, percussionist Jim Brox, and Jeremy Radio from Four Finger Records. I'll be taking some of the most interesting parts from each interview, melding them together, and calling it a wrap for 2022. I hope you enjoy these snippets from these past episodes, and it prompts you to go back and check out the full interviews. I'll leave links to each episode in the show notes. Currently, you're the founder of Dark Label Music. Yep. Can you tell the listeners about Dark Label Music and what it is and what you do?
Yep, sure. So Dark Label Music is a business development company. So we focus on helping music producers, particularly pop producers, commercial music producers, make a living. So any financial pieces of their business, whether it's the ancillary stuff or getting clients, building brand, things of that nature. We help with that.
Okay. Given your music background, how did you actually get involved with doing this kind of business end of things?
Yeah, sure. So I played in bands and, somebody in the band has to have something to record, right? So sure. I think in the 8th grade, I got a little all-in-one Tascam thing, and I always really found that fun, the recording process. And I always had a little home studio and did it part-time. And around 2010, I believe, I started working for Chris Garges at Old House. Which
absolutely, yeah, Chris was on.
Yep, I was in the old house, the one in Gastonia, and it's it was the new building is awesome, but the house in Gastonia was wild, man. It was crazy. It was a really cool spot to come up in. But I would kind of go back and forth between doing, working there, bringing in my own clients, working with Garges, assisting for his clients. Yeah. And I would sort of go back and forth. I'd do it for full time for a while until I ran out of savings, and I'd jump back, get a job, work the job and then leave, go back. I kind of went back and forth, but I always had an interest in business as well. My dad was a sales guy, and I kind of grew up listening to him on the phone and stuff. So it was kind of baked into my head. So I would do stuff like, I did a ton of drugs in high school and went to rehab and treatment and stuff. So I didn't have a college, so it's like, what job do you get, right? Going to sales.
Yeah.
So I did that and would go back and forth, kind of working corporate jobs, corporate sales and marketing in various fields, advertising, real estate, various things, and then working with Chris at Old House. And when I was 24. Chris was like, hey, I was thinking about moving to LA, and he was like, well, I think you could do fine wherever, but, if you don't do it now, you probably won't do it, ever.
Right.
So I was like, all right, cool. So I left 2 weeks later, and he actually drove out there with me. We did a nice scenic tour through Colorado and Utah. It was beautiful, and he introduced me to some people. And when I got to LA, my sort of perspective changed a bit on what I wanted to do. I started seeing people. This would have been 2012. I started seeing guys like with nice home studios, sort of doing everything. Like they were writing with the clients, they were producing and recording it, mixing it.
How long ago were you talking about?
Yeah, so that was like 10-ish years ago, like 2012.
Wow, so almost at the cusp of home recording studios really starting to explode.
Yeah, and I did interviews at the big studios. They were relatively easy to get interviews at, and they were all really nice, like East West, and really nice staff. And I got to hang out, and they'd invite you to some parties and stuff. But as far as like getting jobs there, at that time, not a lot of people were like graduating up and opening up new positions. So I just kind of they were like, yeah, go learn how to make tracks and like get your own clients. So I lived in like a crappy little, 1-bedroom studio thing in Hollywood, and had people just come over, pay me $15 an hour to make tracks for them. And then because of my background in the corporate world, I was like, well, hey, they don't really need to be here. I could do this online.
Right.
And started Sarning Team. This is the long version of how we get to Dark Label. So
that's fine. I'll
shorten it up here. So basically I ran Sarning Team. It was my job there to, to obviously procure the work, get clients, but also hire the talent. And, through that, I just naturally kind of started developing my team, right, of writers and producers that worked for the company. And, around 2018, everybody kind of moved on. Like, the writer got signed to Cobalt. The producer went out to LA to do other things. And I was kind of left there like, what do I want to do next? I'd kind of hit all the goals I wanted to hit. Yeah. So I was in a position, it was actually not a great place to be headspace wise. You don't actually want to hit the goals. I didn't learn that till after. You have to keep the goalpost moving, or you.
Sure. Well, once you hit one, what's the next goal? What's the next goal? How do I do this?
So I didn't have much vision beyond that, and I hit the goal and then kind of went to a little bit of a depression. But anyway, got out of it and was like, hey, what do I want to do? And it's much more challenging to help other producers like get their act together when it comes to business versus running my own. It got kind of repetitive. So that's what prompted me to start the consulting company, Dark Label.
So you started that in 2018 is what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have your partner, Mike Monty. Mike comes on in 2021. So what's happening between 2018 and 2021, this last year, that Mike came on?
Yeah, so I think the first couple of years was really just like putting in my dues and like figuring out. I had never been like a consultant before. So, figuring out like really who our ideal clients are and trying a lot of different things and just getting used to the bit, there are some similarities on how you get, production work and and like consulting work, but there was a lot of differences too. So I hired mentors in that space. It was just kind of putting in my dues in the trenches to even see if it would be a real thing. And then Mike came along. Mike found me through YouTube in 2020, and we just kind of had kept a conversation going.
Did you know him previously or?
No. I know his work, but I didn't know him.
Okay.
Yeah. So we just kind of kept a relationship going. Like at one point he was going to become a client. Like I was going to help him do some like digital product stuff.
Sure.
And, I was like, man, he could bring a lot to the table for our other clients. So Mike came on, and it's still relatively new. We're still sort of getting him fully integrated into the business. But he came on because he fills a gap that I couldn't really help. I'm more on the like online entrepreneurial side of things, the mental side of things, helping people just get over those, obstacles and stuff. And he really understands the industry side.
Right.
He's spent 25 plus years in like your more traditional major label industry side. So he can help them with navigating that piece of, part of the world. So, part of the music industry.
Well, that was one of the things I found interesting about you and Dark Label is that although you are Charlotte based, which is a wonderful thing for our community to have a company like yours here, you don't have a ton of clients from Charlotte. You actually are as you said earlier, you're internet based. So you got clients all over the place coming and that you're working with all over the country, if not the world.
Yep, that's correct. Couple here in Charlotte, but yeah, most are other places.
You started on upright bass and then got into electric bass. Do you have a preference on which you prefer to play today?
At one time I would have told you upright.
Yeah.
But now I don't. I love them both.
Yeah.
Certain music is better with one or the other. I used to be an upright kind of purist, an upright snob. Even it's like, upright sounds better on everything. You can funk, rock, folk, R&B, everything's better with upright. But I don't feel that way at all now. I love electric. I spend most of my time, actually, when I practice, I probably spend most of my time practicing on electric.
What's your instrument of choice when you're playing electric? Do you play a jazz bass? Is it a boutique instrument that you're playing on?
No, I like Fender Jazz, and I have a nice old early '70s P bass. I like that. It's got a lot of character. I've got a couple of jazz basses, and I have flat wound strings on one and round wound strings on one.
So when you're playing electric, coming from an upright background, do you prefer playing a fretless electric, or do you like a fretted electric, or does it matter?
For funk and rock and thing, I like fretted better.
Okay.
I've got a couple of fretless basses. As a matter of fact, I just got one. I've got a Marcustico bass I ordered back in March from its maker in Spain, and when you hear it, you think it's upright.
Wow.
It's not like, it sort of sounds like an upright. No, you hear it. If you're not looking, you think it's an upright.
Yeah.
And it's fretless, and it has lines on it. First bass I ever had with a lined fretted fretboard.
Right.
I'm struggling a little bit with it because we're all used to playing between the frets.
Yes.
And if you don't play dead on the fret, it's not in tune.
Yeah.
And I have another fretless, a Rob Allen that I bought back in '99. I ordered it with a blank fretboard, like an upright.
Yes.
And that's easier actually for me to play for some reason. Just, I don't know why. I'm having to struggle with these fret lines.
It's funny. I own a couple of basses myself, even though I'm a guitar player, and I have a fretless, and I've always loved fretless. The first fretless player that I listened to that I really got into is Tony Franklin. And he had played with Jimmy Page in The Firm, and I discovered him that way. And I always wanted a fretless, and the first fretless I got had lines on it. And I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I did not like it. And being a guitar player, playing fretted instruments, when you play, your fingers are always touching the fret in some way. And I would kind of rely on that, looking at the fretless. And I was like, man, this isn't good. And when I finally got a fretless with no lines on it, I was like, this is the stuff. Why am I using this lined bass?
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. If you don't play right on that fret line. And I've noticed it's changed the way that I've been playing my fretted basses too.
Really?
Yeah, I'm starting to play closer to that fret, which I think, from what I've heard, is the correct way to do it.
Is there a reason, do you know, why they put the lines on the bass? A fretless bass? Why they put the lines on? Is it just for ease?
Yeah, because some people
can't tell.
Want them. Can't just look at the space and tell where a particular note is.
It drives me nuts.
When I first started playing upright, I thought it was going to be a lot harder not to have frets because I was a guitar player, and it's like, and I had to cheat, and everybody has to cheat a little bit. I put a little dot of white out with a G, A, B, and at the octave, and about the time I realized where all the notes were, the whiteout had been worn off. So that wasn't a bad way to cheat. You kind of got to get some perspective.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, at least.
Well, look at the violinists. And you started upright bass. So violinists, when they're young, they use a tape around so they get used to where the notes are, so that after a while they've developed their ear so they could hear where that note is. So.
Yeah.
So Ron, I'm just curious, when you get into bass and you're playing, are you only doing jazz?
No.
Are you doing rock? You doing country? What are you doing?
I do all of it.
Okay.
Everything. I really always have. I really love jazz, and for many years it was all I ever wanted to listen to, and it sort of took over for me, and I sort of got pigeonholed into the jazz bass category.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I love to play everything. I've been on a couple of folk CDs that were nominated for Grammys. I was on Bruce Peepoff's CD it's been more than a couple of years ago now, but it was nominated for Grammy in the folk category. And then Dom Flemons from the Carolina Chocolate Drops.
Okay.
I played on his first two solo records when they split up, and his first one got nominated for a Grammy. So that's folk. And then I was playing with Chris Gargis, and we had a little trio called Bunky Moon with Troy Kahn, and it was more rock oriented and kind of prog, progressive rock, which is what I was listening to before I actually discovered jazz. Like King Crimson and Yes and all that stuff. I just loved it.
That's the thing I love about those old bands like that. I got to say, it brought me to follow other styles of music. Like I listened to prog too when I was younger, or not exactly prog, but let's say just Led Zeppelin. That made me really appreciate acoustic music, and I went to listen to other styles based on that, or laugh about it. But I love Black Sabbath. It's one of my favorite bands. And I listened to, oh my goodness, now I can't remember his name. The great jazz guitar player with two fingers.
Oh, Django Reinhardt.
Thank you. Django Reinhardt, because of Tony Iommi reading an article where he was talking about how he was influenced by Django.
Because he injured himself.
And I was like, listening to his old stuff where he kind of played some jazzy lines on some tunes, and I was like, let's go check this out. So it brought me to the other styles of music.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
My wife plays violin in the Charlotte Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
I told her recently, we were listening to some Emerson, Lake and Palmer and watching some video clips on YouTube and stuff. I'm not ashamed to admit it, but it's true. I never heard the first recording of pictures at an exhibition I ever heard was theirs. It wasn't the orchestral version. It wasn't Mussorgsky's.
And you're probably not the first person. Same thing with Rodeo.
Yeah. But like you said, some of that stuff got me interested in, the group Yes used to open their show with the finale from, the finale from Rite of Spring, I think.
Really? Okay. I didn't even know.
Yeah. And, it's beautiful. And they used to, when I saw them in the late 70s, the lights were out and this beautiful orchestral music starts, and it was the pianist, doing it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but that made me go back and listen to Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, because they played the finale of it to open their shows.
Yeah.
And
as a bass player, you must love Bach with those, and Baroque music with those moving bass lines.
Yeah,
huh?
I do. Yeah. For fun, I try to play the Bach cello suites.
Oh, okay.
On upright and electric. And they're really fun on electric. Charlie Hayden used to say if he would be the best bass player around today if he was. Yeah.
Genius. So I wanted to find out from you, being a bass player, you're not in the limelight. Mostly bass players are relegated to being side guys. And there are a lot of famous bass players, don't get me wrong, but it seems that most bass players are relegated. They're on the side. Let's say you say Led Zeppelin, one of my favorite groups. John Paul Jones is always the side guy.
Yeah.
Jimmy Page and Robert Plant are the guys up front. Do you like being the supporting player? Is that your thing? Or would you prefer being up front more?
No, I enjoy the supportive role.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, I started doing a little bit of singing, with a couple of guys around town. Jeremy Shaw and we were doing a few duo gigs, and it's real different because it's like, wait a minute, I'm not in the background anymore. It's a different mindset, and I've gotten so used to it because back when I played guitar, I sang quite a bit.
Okay.
But as I became a bass player and settled into that role, in a way it suits me a little better to be in a supportive role,
right?
And maybe let the guys with the bigger egos represent the band, in a better way.
What's your background with classical guitar? Where did you study? Who did you study with when you were in the States?
In the States, when I came to South Carolina, and I studied with Christopher Berg, who I've heard is retiring this year from University of South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very lucky. I got the scholarship. I got the assistantship. So my education did not cost me anything.
Wow, lucky.
Absolutely. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity, to be able to do it. And so that's basically was my experience with my American degree in music. And, later I started competing in the competitions, and I felt like my education was continuing.
Yeah.
I met lots of exciting teachers and very talented students, and and that's where I am today.
Just out of curiosity, playing classical guitar, have you played around with other styles? Do you do any bass? Do you do any rock or anything, jazz or anything like that, or do you primarily stick to classical guitar style repertoire?
I have to say that because of my difference in cultural background, when I was growing up, I felt like I did not really have an option. Electric guitar was very expensive. Honestly, we did not even have the open access to music. That would be that would be considered like a Western influence.
Yes.
And it was highly prohibited back in USSR. So, jazz, of course, was out of the options. So I was growing up in this very classical environment. But I always wanted to do something else. And just a few months ago, I ended up buying my first electric guitar.
Wow, okay.
And
that's exciting.
It is. Now, the challenge is, open the case and start learning it.
That's amazing. I love it. So you have 3 recordings currently available. You've been doing a lot of playing. You've recorded. Can you tell me a little bit about each of the recordings that you have?
Yes. I feel like, all my recordings had a very organic beginning. I never really planned these projects. I remember when I was about to graduate from the University of South Carolina, I asked my teacher, Christopher Berg, what should I do next? And he said, well, you probably should start booking concerts. And
just start booking concerts.
And I asked him, well, how does someone do that? And I remember he said, well, you probably need to record a few songs to send around. And I thought, well, why would I just do a few songs if I have all those pieces, prepared for my graduate recital?
Yeah.
So I basically end up recording the entire album, and I named it Timeless Enchantment.
Oh, okay.
And, that album, in my opinion, was very traditional. It had a little bit of everything. It had Bach and some Latin American music by, such famous composers like Piazzolla and Jorge Morel. I did some, Russian music and, of course, tangos by Roland Diaz.
Was that music that you picked, was it specific to the CD, to the recording, or was it something that you had repertoire that you were already playing?
That was a repertoire I was already playing, and the reason it had a little bit of everything, because that's kind of a standard practice for your graduate recital.
Okay.
You want to represent, your ability of being able to play different styles of music.
Yes.
Within classical tradition. So that's why I said, like, this first album was really quite, traditional in the scope of music I presented. My next album came a few years later, and the idea was originated by one of my fans who used to come to all my concerts. And he said, Marina, you seem to play quite a lot of music by this Russian composer, Nikita Koshkin.
Yes.
And people seemed really be taken by these works. They're very intense and funny. So he said, why won't you record an album, dedicating to this composer? And he also did something that, probably pushed me a little bit further is that he offered the financial assistance to produce this album. So this is how a Moment of Magic album was born. And on this album, I basically recorded some of my most favorite works by Nikita Koshkin. And I'm so grateful that this, fan of mine recommended this, because I probably would never think about it.
When did you record that Nikita Koshkin CD?
It was recorded in 2006.
Okay.
And, this album really opened up lots of doors for me in the classical guitar world. Mm-hmm. I felt like I became a little bit, noticeable. Fingerstyle Guitar Magazine and Classical Guitar in UK and the Record Guide, among others, gave me really nice reviews.
Wow.
And I felt like, if I would get invitation to a festival, people would always kind of hint me that they would like for me to play music by Nikita Koshkin.
Right.
It seemed like it probably became my signature in a way.
Okay. He's got some wonderful, wonderful material.
Yes, I think so too. So my last album, well, I hope not last, but a third album, was produced in close collaboration with a great flutist, Terry Forsher Milter.
Okay.
At that point, she lived in Columbia, South Carolina. And one day I just received a call out of blue from her asking if I might be interested in playing in duet. And I said, sure. And, 3 years later, we ended up producing an album together calling America from North to South.
How did she know how did she find out about you? Was it through friends? Was it through a recording? Did you ever find out how she got your name?
Well, because she lived in the same city at that point in Columbia, South Carolina. I think she started asking around, and some faculties at USC recommended me, if I recollect this correctly.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be a nicer story to tell if I could say something like, "Oh, she heard me on the radio, and she just was blown away by my playing, and that was it. That was just a turning point." But yeah, so the story is very, casual.
Do you pick up tricks or ways to play from other percussionists that you see, or did you learn from somebody? Did you have a teacher besides the fellow that you were saying who influenced you to play because he had all these instruments?
I've never had a teacher.
Okay.
I always say that I've had the best teachers in the world. They just didn't know it. That I would. I've always had favorite people that I like, so
listening to their recordings, as it were, or seeing them live.
Yeah,
pick up all those things.
The great thing about the years before YouTube was you'd buy a record and you take it home and listen to it, and you couldn't see the person do this, so you it was much easier to find yourself and find your own voice before YouTube. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense because, being a guitarist, I think one of the issues that I feel anyway, a lot of the younger players are just imitating what other people have done, and they're not developing their own styles. And they are just, okay, I want to sound like Eddie Van Halen. Let me learn all Eddie Van Halen's looks because that's on YouTube and I can do that. I can do this. And then the reason older players, let's say players from the 60s and 70s, Jimmy Page or Jeff Beck or Hendrix, they developed their own styles because they had to. There was no YouTube to show them how to do everything, so they had to figure it all out by themselves.
Yeah.
Which is to your point about YouTube.
Yeah. When I discovered Brazilian music, mid-70s, I guess, that changed my life. And I would search these, I go to this thing that used to be called a record store. And I go to the international sections and stuff, and I'd buy these records and take them home and try to, what is that he's playing? And
What got you into searching or getting into like Brazilian music? Because me being a guitarist, I've mentioned a couple of times on the podcast, I loved some of the old bands. So let's say Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath, and I'd read articles with those guys, and they would also talk about, let's say, Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. He would talk about his love of Django Reinhardt and getting into that. And I was like, who's that? And I would go back and I'd trace back what these guys listened to, and I checked that out. Was that something similar for you?
it's not that I followed who they listened to, which I probably should have, or I might have it at with somebody. But it's like when I discovered Ayrton Moreira.
Mm-hmm.
That opened up a world to me that I didn't know existed.
Okay.
And I had to, I wanted to be that, And I love Brazilian music because to me it's just really, really beautiful. The rhythms are gorgeous and the melodies are great, and there's so much life in it.
When you started getting into percussion, what made you feel that pull towards that particular instrument? Towards percussion instruments? Was it the effect you liked of, playing with your hands? Was it the rhythms that just got to you that somebody else was doing? For me, I played being a guitarist. It was the cool factor of, seeing some of these guys in these bands swagger around on stage playing and the sounds they made. What was it for you that pulled you into percussion?
That's a good question. It's just something that connected with me. My dad was native, so that probably has something to do with it.
Okay.
There's that instilled thing. And of course, in that world, drums aren't a musical instrument. They're a vehicle.
Right.
So there's always been that pull in me. I can't explain it. It's sort of an inborn thing.
Fill me in. What's Four Finger Records all about?
Yeah.
And how did you come to be involved with it?
Yeah, so me and Leo Solis, who's a local really killer musician and producer in town, we met through like mutual friends and bands and kind of just really hit it off. And, we just are constantly, it's funny, once a week or more, we'd go to the Y and get a steam in.
Right.
And we would just like plot out all these ideas like two mob bosses, And one of them was like, we're in these bands, we're trying to throw more shows and do this thing. And, he's in a band called Solis. And at the time, my band was, the Rainiers, which we still might do some stuff, but we slowed down. Everybody got busy. So we started to throw shows like Solis and Rainiers and some other stuff. And like, what if we started a label and it would be kind of fake, I guess, like, but all our bands would be on it.
Right.
And it would maybe make us seem more legit. And we just thought it was a funny idea. Four Fingers, comes from The Simpsons because they all only had four fingers. I don't know if you noticed that. And one episode when someone's shoplifting, he goes, 4-finger discount. So I think originally we were going to call it 4-finger discount records, and we changed it to just 4-finger.
Sweet.
So we kind of got a cool logo and made a website and printed some t-shirts out the gate. But then we realized, like, hey, we got some friends that we've known for a long time. They're starting these bands, and they're younger as a band and also as people. And like, I've been touring for so long, and I've booked tours, and I've been the merch guy, and I've promoted them and made the flyers and printed the t-shirts. And Leo has been a producer for a long time and mixes and masters and has a studio. Like, we could actually like help some bands out maybe, so we had this idea of doing a DIY or do-it-yourself record label where, we're just going to work with our friends. It's handshake deals. We've never made a dime from it. Like, any money we make, even from shows, we give back to the bands. It goes back to print more, it's all kind of self-sustaining. So yeah, we started like, let's do a 4-finger night at Petra's, and Perry there's Solid Gold, and would let us do our thing. And so, some people that maybe would come to see our bands one of these bands, it was like one of their first shows, and they got to play for a decent little crowd, and suddenly they're getting more press local than any of our bands. This band called The Wilt, really great kind of alt country band, and they're like 24, and the songs are so good, and they look good, and they play great.
Yeah.
And they played 2 shows, and they're getting like big write-ups and like Queen City Nerve and like, but so there was like, hey, maybe someone's gonna come check out The Wilt, but then maybe they'll like my band, and it just kind of felt like the wheels just kept turning with us. Of like, we got this little corner of, which I think is a very great music scene in Charlotte that people we have relationships with that we've known since they were kids, or that we've toured in other bands together and we're all friends. Like, let's just try to document our little corner of it. Let's throw shows together. And, since we started doing compilation tapes, where, we do a big tape release and every band could submit a song. And,
Right.
Cassette tapes are coming back. We'd sell like 100 of them. It's crazy. So it was just so rad to like, in 20 years look back on this tape and be like, man, I remember the year we made that, and all those bands were playing at the Milestone, and it was so much fun. And so it feels like we're kind of making these little time capsules of this cool little moment what we have right now,
Yeah, there's a old record label. I don't even know. I think they're still around, but Megaforce Records.
Oh,
They
yeah,
used
yeah.
to do that
Uh-huh.
kind of thing.
Absolutely.
With the
Yeah,
metal bands.
metal Massacre, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great case in point. And then, Discord in DC, and then you had like Fat Records in the East Bay.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, like, they put out a new compilation, let me get it. And I would love all the bands.
Yeah.
So it's an old school, I guess, like way of getting word out on stuff, but it's just so much more like community, which that word gets overused, but we just want to like support each other. And then so sorry, bunny trail there, but kind of so where the chips kind of landed with it as far as Fourfinger, if there's a band we're working with, it's all handshake. And some of them want us to help them make their record,
Right.
like with Leo and me, and we can recommend an artist, and this is where you should do t-shirts. And if you want to, I can help you plan, like put it out this day, give yourself 2 months. We'll hit up all the local press, podcasts. And some guys are like, hey, I got a new single coming out tomorrow. They just did it all. I was like, cool. That's great too. We'll post about it,
There you go.
So it's kind of like empowering these bands to like, we'll help you as much as you want if you have any questions. But if not, like go do your thing, and we'll do a show next month. It'll be a lot of fun,
So how do you guys choose the bands that you're working with? Because first off, they're all Charlotte bands.
Yes,
we're talking
correct.
about.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. So it's all just Charlotte. Yeah.
That's one thing I love.
Yeah,
is
me
just
too.
Promoting the local scene.
Yeah. And it's just like documenting it, because it's like, there's lots of rad bands in other towns, and people hit us up like, hey, we're from Charleston. Would you work with us?
Right.
It's like, no, why don't you do what we're doing, but do it for Charleston?
Yeah.
I
I actually get emails from people all over the world trying to promote their stuff on the podcast, and I always respond.
Yeah.
But I always try to give a nice response and just say, hey, thank you very much for contacting me. The Queen City Music Podcast is just dedicated to the local Charlotte scene.
Absolutely, man.
So
and yeah, it's like that should empower you to like go start a Charleston Fourfinger Records, or your version of it. And but yeah, most of the bands we work with, it's come around very organically, like, because some people have hit us up like, hey, would you work with my band? And we're like, I don't know, like, we just kind of go with our gut.
Mm-hmm.
But in almost every case, it's someone we've known for a very long time.
okay.
And so it just kind of makes sense. Like, this artist we've been working with recently, his band's called Siege, but his name's CJ Hardy, and we've known him he's probably like late 20s now, but I've literally known him since he was like 11 or 10. And even then he was playing in bands by the time he was 15
Wow.
at Tremont Music Hall, like opening for my band at the time. And he was incredible. So like he toured in a band called Matrimony for a long time, and they were kind of like doing the major label thing.
Mhm.
And it kind of fizzled out as it does. And then he was in a band called Bash, and they were touring hard. But he's always been the side guy. So he's like, hey man, I love what you guys are doing. I want to put out my own record. I don't want to pitch it to the LA guys. I don't want to do that thing. Like,
Right.
I just want to do a local thing, and I love the community and yada yada. We're like, yeah, let's do it. So we're doing like Leo's producing the album and helping him with it, and it's so good. Like,
That's
so
awesome.
it's most of the bands kind of have a story like that.
Well, do you know, out of curiosity, if there's any other record labels in town that are like you guys that are just devoted to the Charlotte scene?
No, there's some really great ones like Refresh and Self-Aware.
Yeah.
But really, like, I feel like they do what we do way better. But they cast a little wider net, I think.
Right.
It is, I would say, in both cases, mostly Charlotte, but not exclusively.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they may have even started to doing something similar to us, but I think both cases they're really good at what they do and doing like a package for the bands and like the vinyls and everything, and it's really rad. And they've both been very kind to us and answered questions and stuff. But I think they set their, if a band blows them away and they want to work with them, they don't care where they live. I think ultimately.
Right.
Yeah. So, but both. In summation, both of them are mostly Charlotte, but I don't think exclusively. So I don't know of one in town that just does Charlotte. If there is, I respect. I don't know who you are.
and the bands that you have on the roster of Four Finger, is there a particular sound that you guys are cultivating, or
no? It's been really random.
Yeah.
As of pre-COVID, when we were a lot more active, like 2 alt country bands, like 2 kind of synthy 80s kind of bands.
Really? That's good.
Yeah, like my weird instrumental band, and so yeah, it was a real like wide net. So I would say the Charlotte, there isn't much of a big cohesive sound here, but it is very creative, and that's what I love is like when you go to a local show, it's not going to be the same genre all night.
Thanks for listening to episode 63 of the Queen City Music Podcast, and I hope you go back and check out past episodes. You can find the QCMP on all your favorite streaming platforms. As always, if you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out our local partners, Records on the Wall at rexonthewall.com, Reporting from 20XX at reportingfrom20xx.wordpress.com, Queen City Live at Instagram.com/Queen City Live Music, and Charlotte New Music at charlottenewmusic.org. I hope you enjoy the holidays, and I'll see you in 2023. Until then, be well and stay safe.